Former Vice President Jonathan Lamb and his wife Susie Lamb claimed that throughout their time at daystar, they were frequently the targets of spiritual abuse and bullying by Jonathan's mother, former President Joanie Lamb, and her cronies. Most obviously, they claimed that on July 11th, 2023, Joni called a meeting with Jimmy Evans, the creator of Exxon Marriage, as a surprise to the couple. Evans informed Jonathan and Susie on a video they provided to Roy's report that they had to submit to their mother because she spoke for God, and Janie put down her son by telling him that his wife had him by the balls. Jonathan prayed to hear God's voice. Evan answered to hear the voice of God. So I can't hear from God, I have to hear from her, Jonathan then inquired outside of daystar. Evans replied, what she says is God in daystar, this is the voice of God in daystar. As previously reported by TR, the contentious meeting took place almost 2 years after Jonathan accused a family member of abusing his daughter after he witnessed the family member engaging in sexual activity with her. Jonathan and Susie claimed that Joni and her late husband, Marcus Lamb, a co-founder of DTER, promptly defended the family member and declared him innocent. The family was severely strained as a result. However, Marcus informed Jonathan and his brother-in-law, Jonathan J.D. Weiss, a few weeks later in late August 2021, that the family member had been cleared by an internal investigation. Marcus passed away unexpectedly in November 2021 from issues associated to COVID, and Jonathan and Susie learned only later that the investigation had serious faults. On June 10, 2023, Joni wed Doug Weiss, a sex therapist and regular daytime TV guest. Jay Weiss is not related to Doug. 2 months after Marcus's death on January 27, 2022, Doug and his wife of 30 years filed for divorce. Jonathan and Susie claimed that the July 2023 meeting with Evans was an effort to coerce them into openly endorsing Joan's second marriage. Jonathan and Susie claimed that neither Joan's children nor their husbands supported her marriage to Weiss. They all believed that Joni was engaging in adultery by marrying Weiss, and that Weiss lacked biblical justification for a divorce. daystar's longtime friend Denise Boggs penned an impassioned letter to Joan's family just 2 months prior to the wedding, pleading with them to step in. In addition to having a close relationship with T, Boggs had previously provided premarital counseling to Doug and Lisa Weiss. Divided, she had shared her concerns about Weiss with Joni, but she refused to listen to me now, according to Boggs' letter. According to the Bong, Weiss was deceiving Joni because he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. She said that Joni didn't support divorce until she was duped by the adversary on the daystar platform, and Boggs wrote that he is unfit for such a prominent role. On one of the nation's most well-known Christian television networks, the enemy has been successful in mocking the marriage bond. 2 days after receiving the letter, Jonathan informed TR that he gathered his family to speak with Joni. Nevertheless, Joni only led each person to express their emotions for 60 seconds. All I see from us is fear. She added and rushed out the door to avoid missing Doug's flight to New York. Following Doug and Joni's marriage, Jonathan stated, on July 5th, 2023, Jonathan and Susie were asked to read a comment from a fan who complimented Joan's recent marriage to Towai, even though they were still unhappy with the union. They declined to do so because they believed it would be interpreted as endorsing the marriage, which reportedly greatly displeased Joni. Following this, Joni met with Evans, who, according to Evans' 2017 book, Broken Trust Consultant and pastoral coach for Broken Trust, equated Joan's desires to those of God and Satan. According to Remy Deesh, spiritual abuse occurs when someone uses God or their purported relationship with God to manipulate behavior for personal benefit. Jonathan replied, if God came to you right now and told you that you made a mistake, would you fix it? And he and Susie said that Evans and Joni were doing just that when they recorded the meeting. Occurring, of course, without inquiry, when Jonathan responds, you're not Evans, disagrees, but God didn't appear or communicate in a way that was audible. Joey is informed by Jonathan that God spoke to you through me. In response, Joey says he spoke to you through Jimmy. Additionally, Joni and Evans defended their control over Jonathan and Susie by drawing on their ministry expertise. It's a spirit that you won't listen to authority and to experience, Evans says to Jonathan. Did you hear the spirit? I work with couples and have been a pastor for 41 years. I don't think so, Joni responds. Compared to the rest of us at this meeting, your experience is roughly a thumbnail. Jonathan questioned Evans about Joni's supervisor and what duty she would have in her absence. In response, Evans said, I'm on the board, Jonathan. Reactions: the only people on the day's board at the time were Jonathan, Joni, and Tom Callender, who was Joan's longtime friend and a lawyer. Jonathan said to TR, "Yeah, but individually, you're not her accountability. Individually, you're her employee." Evans claims that no one else is accountable for her conduct and that she is the voice of God in daystar. Evans responds to Jonathan's grievance by pointing to Romans 13 as evidence that we ought to submit to all authority since it was established by God. Jonathan protests once more, claiming that it is none of your concern to answer to their question about who is to blame for her behavior in daystar. Evans advises you to follow her instructions and to leave if you are unable to do so. Joni concludes by saying, "Tell them what the Lord told you about stubbornness and what it leads to. According to Evans, Saul was admonished by the Lord. Rebellion is the sin of witchcraft. This is as idolatry and sin. Thus it likens stubbornness to idolatry. This is because, as you were doing with Doug Weiss earlier in the meeting, being stubborn entails worshiping your own viewpoint." Additionally, Johnny accuses Jonathan of elevating his viewpoint to an idol and forewarns Jonathan of the consequences. "God wouldn't be pleased with this," Johnny responds, "and you've opened yourself up to demonic activity in your family and with your kids by your rebellion against me." Jonathan continues. Susie and Jonathan disagree, claiming that it is rebellion. As Joni states at one point during the discussion, "You'll bring a curse upon you and your kids." They also use the 2021 sex abuse allegations as evidence that Susie is acting on her emotions. This demonstrates how erratic Susie's thinking is. "Since I know a family member wouldn't want me to, I won't tell you about the issue with them." Joni tells Evans that although she drove that vehicle for a long time, Susie and Jonathan were both certain that a family member was doing something he wasn't doing and that it was a horrible incident that happened in our family. There is no difference, it is the same thing. 15 minutes later, Joni and Susie dispute about Susie's refusal to read the viewer comment, which leads to the conflict's climax. "If I'm not comfortable, then I have to stick with my convictions." Susie informs Joni it is impossible to agree or disagree with. Susie is told by Joni that it's okay to read anything a viewer has to say about her, you, or anybody else. She is not involved in it. To do with you, when you read a viewer's comment, "I'm telling a falsehood," you don't stand for anything according to Susie. According to Joni, I'm reading it, it's not a lie. According to Susie, it's accurate. If I say something I don't believe, it's a lie, Joni asserts. Susie claims it has nothing to do with you. This is a comment from a viewer. It's a spectator comment, not a Susie comment. Susie warns me not to return, and Joni says I can't go against my convictions. "If you can't read a positive thing about Doug, you're fired," Jody says. "You're not welcome here. The green room is not something you'll do." Dare is shown by Jonathan and Susie that you won't take any action after Susie is sacked. Looking at Jonathan, Jimmy and Joni repeatedly ask him if he would read the letter again. Joni is asked to do Jonathan's bidding. "All I want to hear is that you will do what I say." Joni declares that it is over. "I'd rather not hear any more. I'm not interested in learning about your own convictions." Evans questions if Jonathan would read the comment today if requested, but Jonathan believes he will give in to Joni. Following a protracted silence, Evans states, "See. Now you're in trouble with her," Joni informs Susie that she is a terrible guy when she complains to being called such. "You've got him by the balls, Susie, my dear. They're frightening." Jonathan is informed by Susie that they are thinking negatively. "When you say things like that, I've got you by the balls. You gave him a look." Joni claims that I gave him a mournful face as if you were holding him. "What is happening is terrible." Johnny responds, "What's evil is you and the spirit that's driving you." No, Susie responds. "What's evil is you." Susie exits the room after the meeting, leaving Jonathan and his mother by themselves. "You're going to pay a lot for crossing that queue with Susie," Evans, Joni informs Jonathan. "Hold your ground. Susie and I agree," Jonathan tells his mother, but she doesn't appear to hear him. "You are about to catch hell, so you handle her," he says to her. According to Joanie, "You're her covering, handle her. This is going to be his Alamo," Johnny tells Evans, after which he decides whether or not to manage her. "I can inform him that your leadership position at daystar will most likely depend on how he handles that." Following the meeting, Jonathan lost his job at daystar. He emailed Joni to explain that everything was totally out of control and that he felt stuck in an untenable situation. "I never saw myself in this predicament. We must discuss this immediately." In response, Joni stated that payroll will not be impacted at this time. She will notify Jonathan when she is prepared to discuss this topic once more in 18 months. daystar's bullying and threats escalated, according to Jonathan and Susie, and on November 16th, 2024, Jonathan was let go by daystar. Our next story will go into further detail about those 18 months. Daystar was contacted by TRAW with specific inquiries on the narrative. Joni would issue a formal statement this afternoon, Daystar said. Because Jonathan was not elected future president of Daystar upon the death of his father, Joni accuses him of creating a slander campaign. Joni also exposes a part of an email from Jonathan and accuses him of attempting to use blackmail to gain the position of Daystar president. We still want to get past this incident, but we also need to be transparent about security. We propose that Joni, Daystar, and I sign a new contract that outlines my future role as president of Daystar and prohibits Joni or any other officer or director from acting in a way that would jeopardize our jobs without a well-defined, valid reason and the prior consent of a majority of the board of directors. This will help us achieve our goal of having a clear understanding of our futures at Daystar. As per Jonathan and Susie's agreement, we will not utilize, disseminate, or publish any audio recordings that can cause injury or embarrassment to Daystar, Joni, or our family. The couple's pledge to keep audio recordings private was not an act of extortion, rather, it was a response to the 13 requirements Daystar outlined for them to meet in order to be allowed to return to their previous positions at Daystar. For Joni to speak privately with Joni and Susie about her inability to read aloud, and for the pair to decide to remove all recordings of their conversations with Jimmy Evans and Joni. Jonathan added that he was discussing his father's strategy for what would happen in the event that Joni retired or died, not trying to replace his mother as president of Daystar. Susie and Jonathan both noted, nevertheless, that these discussions took place prior to Denise Boggs informing them on November 18, 2023, that their family member had been exonerated of molesting their daughter. The Coops claim that at that time they only wanted justice and no longer gave a damn about their jobs.